Keep all your game, highs and lows, highs and lows.
I have never seen, created, or used a build quite like this one I'm about to show you. It's absolutely insane, just see for yourself.
Keep all your game, highs and lows, highs and lows. It's all the same, highs and lows, highs and lows.
That was insane. All the yellow numbers and huge explosions everywhere. Man, if that didn't get you hooked on wanting to try out this build for yourself, I don't know what will. So I'll be going over the subclass, aspects, and all the fragments, weapons, and armor mods you'll need to create the Fallen Fellwinder build I have for you today. If you wouldn't mind and are still in the flow of the video, be sure to drop a like and a sub on this video as it really helps this channel out a lot. I also have a Discord where I post video announcements, upcoming videos, or video ideas. Feel free to check it out as it will be linked down in the description below. So as we get into the build, we're going to be covering first the exotic of choice, which is going to be Fellwinder's Helm. Most of you are probably like, Fellwinder's Helm? That exotic is situational and not really worth using. But wait, its exotic perk called Warlord's End states power melee final blows create a burst of energy that weakens nearby targets. Finishers and final blows against more powerful targets increase the radius of the burst and the length of the weakening effect. I can promise you by the end of this video you'll see why it's so good when paired with Dragon's Breath. More on that later. So next we're going to jump into the subclass and all the fragments and aspects that you'll need for this build. So for our super, we're going to be using Well of Radiance for that survivability and in-game content, and because who doesn't like having a Warlock for in-game. And for our abilities, we're going to be running Phoenix Dive, Celestial Fire for our melee, and then our grenade is going to be our fusion grenade. So next we'll be covering the aspects for this build. So first up we got Touch of Flame, which allows our solar grenades to have enhanced functionality. And for this build we're going to be running specifically fusion grenade, so it's going to be allowed to explode twice because of Touch of Flame. For our second aspect for this build, we're going to be using Heat Rises, which allows you to fire weapons, melee, or throw grenades while gliding. Also, when you consume your grenade, it'll grant healing. And lastly, while getting final blows in the air, grant melee energy. So next we're going to get into the fragments for this build, which I think will greatly improve the performance of this build in higher content, and especially lower content too. When there's more ad density, sometimes it can be very awesome to see. So for our first fragment, we're going to be covering Ember of Char, which makes our solar ignition spread scorch to all enemies in its proximity, which I think will really pair well with Dragon's Breath. Next we have Ember of Searing, which final blows on scorched enemies grant melee energy and creates a fire sprite which grants grenade on pickup. For our third fragment, we'll be using Ember of Eruption, which makes our solar ignitions have a larger radius. And for our fourth and final fragment, we will be using Ember of Ashes, which applies more scorch stacks to enemies. Next up, we'll be getting into the armor mods that you'll need for creating this build. So for our helmet mods, we'll be running Harmonic Siphon, which will generate an orb when rapidly defeating targets with a solar weapon. And then we'll also be running ×2 hands on, which gives us super energy on melee kills. For our gauntlets, we'll be running Heavy Handed, which powered melee final blows create an orb of power. Impact Induction, by which causing damage with a powered melee attack reduces our grenade cooldown. And then also we'll be running Melee Kickstart, which grants melee energy when our armor charges are consumed, and we gain more energy based on the amount of armor charges that we are consuming. For our chest mods, we'll be running ×2 charged up, which increases the max stack of armor charges by 1, and then a Harmonic Reserves mod for that extra ammo. For our leg mods, we'll be running Better Already, which regens health immediately after picking up an orb of power, and then also running ×1 stacks on stacks, which by picking up an orb of power grants you 1 additional stack of armor charge. For our class item mods, we'll be running Distribution, which reduces all ability cooldowns when using your class ability, Bomber, which reduces grenade cooldown when using your class ability, and Outreach, which reduces our melee energy when using our class ability. So for this build, we are going to pair Fellwinter's Helm with a seasonal exotic rocket launcher, Dragon's Breath, which has risen to the top as one of the best exotics in Destiny 2 as of this season. Its intrinsic trait is what makes this rocket such a top tier option, which is called Composite Propellant, and states rockets embed themselves in struck targets and periodically eject incendiary fuel that inflicts scorch. The longer this weapon goes without firing, the more fuel the next rocket contains. Composite Propellant pairs so well with the fragments Ember of Ashes and Ember of Ashes mentioned earlier in the video that basically it's scorch on scorch on scorch, scorch everywhere, and then add the fragment Ember of Eruption into the mix with all that scorch stacking. It will create an even bigger ignition and then spread more scorch and then more ignitions, creating a huge chain reaction as you've seen at the beginning of this video. Also pairing all this with the Dragon's Breath catalyst called Pyromancer, and states this weapon replenishes its fuel faster. Defeating targets with this weapon causes them to periodically spawn or drop fire sprites. This pairs extremely well with the fragment Ember of Searing mentioned earlier in the video, which gives us that grenade energy and creates a fire sprite, so more grenade energy to consume to get either healing or heat rises back to get more melee energy. So where Fellwinter's Helm comes into play is when you weaken a target by a powered melee final blow, the enemies around that enemy you killed cause those enemies in Fellwinter's weakening radius to take more damage and also blind them for a short duration. The weakening effect causes Scorch to stack faster, and on the solar ignition from Dragon's Breath or other abilities, the weakening effect from Fellwinter's Helm spreads with ignitions, and the ignitions also spread the Scorch, creating that chain reaction as well. So next I want to cover the gameplay loop for this build so you can get the best performance possible out of it. So first you want to get a powered melee kill, and then second you want to shoot your Dragon's Breath at enemies, and then you want to consume your grenade to grant you heat rises, and then while in the air get some kills to get your melee energy out of it, and then drop down and grab the fire sprites when it's safe if you're able to. And then next you want to use your Phoenix Dive while having heat rises, which also will spread Scorch and give you healing as well. And then rinse and repeat that cycle, and then watch the fireworks go. So next I'm going to cover a few legendary weapons that I think will pair really well with this build that I personally use while using this build. So like solar builds with Incandescent that will spread Scorch on final blows. So weapons like Mida Mini Tool, Amit, or Abyss Defiant. And for the kinetic slot you could go for weapons with Pugilist that can grant melee energy on final blows, or Demolitionist, which grants grenade energy on final blows. With all that, that pretty much covers the whole build, and I hope you find it to be as unique and fun as I think it is. I also have this build's dim link down in the description below, along with some other videos by me if you want to check them out. If you found this video to be helpful or useful in some way, please be sure to leave a like down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe. It's completely free and you'd be helping this channel more than you realize. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one, Guardians.